Dobro večer svima. Prije svega želim da pozdravim današnje učesnike panela, gospođu Osmani, predsjednicu Kosova, gospodina Đukanovića, predsjednika Crne Gore. Da li je moguće uspostaviti ipak stabilne odnose? Da li smatrate da će u Beogradu doći do pomaka? Od prije 25 godina do danas nije se mnogo promijenilo u generalnoj ideologiji i u odnosu Beograda prema Prištini. Da li smatrate da je sada možda vrijeme da će doći do toga pomaka u toj ideologiji i da li smatrate da će doći do strana potpisivanja od strane zvaničnog Beograda i predsjednika Vučića sporazuma koje su podnijele, dakle, Francuska i Njemačka? To je jedno pitanje. A drugo pitanje je da li sa strane Kosova može doći do određenih kompromisnih poteza vezanih za formiranje takozvane zajednice srpskih opština i kako vi vidite rješenje tog problema?
So I'll be speaking in English based on our previous agreement. Let me thank you all for being here and for having us. It's a great pleasure to be, in fact, the very first president to visit Montenegro on an official visit, on a bilateral official visit, since we established diplomatic relations. And of course, we will do our utmost to make sure that this visit further contributes to enhancing our already great relations between our two countries, and most importantly, the very unique and special relations between our people. I think the relationship between our two countries can really serve as an example of what good neighbors can truly do to further enhance peace and stability in the entire region. On your question, I mean, the first one was, do we see it possible for a deal to be signed and for peace to finally be achieved? Well, if we had an interlocutor like you, like 25 years ago, sure, it would have been possible. Probably we wouldn't even needed more than 2 decades. But unfortunately, who we have on the other side of the table is President Vučić, who, while the Prime Minister of Kosovo was a prisoner of war, Vučić was serving as Milosevic's Minister of Propaganda. And one might say, why are you starting your presentation here by talking about the past? And, well, in fact, it's not just the past. It's unfortunate that it's not just the past, but just 2 or 3 days ago, the president of Serbia just expressed his current views on his negotiation counterpart, Mr. Kurti, by saying that he regrets that Kurti and more than 1,000 other war prisoners were released from prison, and by criticizing then leader Koštunica for actually taking that decision. And these were the words of Vučić in the parliament a few days ago, not in the 90s. In 2023, he expressed regrets that the other part in the negotiations, the Prime Minister of Kosovo, was released. So that means he wished he was still in prison and tortured and probably not alive. So it is unfortunate that we have that situation, and that doesn't make me very hopeful on what position Serbia will take, because of course in any negotiation process, in any dialogue, you have to tango. So you need the commitment of both. You need the contribution of both. You need the constructiveness of both if you want to achieve success that is long-standing and truly contributes to everlasting peace and stability. But what we're dealing with is, on one side, Kosovo, a country that has, throughout the entire process of negotiations, whether we're talking about the Ahtisaari negotiations or the dialogue that started in 2011, we've been making compromise after compromise, concession after concession, some of which, to be very frank, have brought us to the brink of non-functionality as a state. Whereas what we've received from Serbia, it's a lot of words, sometimes even signatures on paper, but the vast majority of agreements signed by Serbia were never implemented in practice, including what I thought was one of the most important aspects of the dialogue process, which was the promise made by Serbia in 2013 that it will dismantle all of its illegal structures in North Kosovo. But if we look at the reality, they are extremely strong today, and Vučić continues to pay them, to incite them, and to entirely control their actions. Not that much hope when it comes to what we might see from Serbia. I know that President Vučić uses different tactics from time to time, and apart from the drama king that he is, sometimes he makes people think that he has changed, and then after 24 hours he again says the opposite. But the bitter truth for all of us is that while he might have changed his tactics and his strategies, he did not change his aims. And his aims have been made very clear, oftentimes by him personally, sometimes by people around him that sometimes he makes as Minister of Interior, sometimes as heads of intelligence services, that have been his strongest connections with Russia. But he has made it clear that he sees our countries as temporary states, which he wants to destroy. Who does that remind you of? It's clearly the exact same hegemonic view that Russia has towards its neighbors. It's Putin's playbook. So what Serbia has been doing is dancing on Putin's tune. That's what they have been doing. So I think it's an illusion, really an illusion, to believe that they will break away from Russia and Russian influence, because it's too deep. And turn to what we call Western values, turn to European values, and to believe that that will happen, I believe it's an illusion at this point in time. I wish I was wrong. I really do hope I was wrong, but history shows, and we should have learned this by now, especially for everyone that has some experience from the 90s, that appeasement of autocrats never leads to long-lasting peace. Quite the opposite, it encourages them to do more violence, more destruction, and more attacks against others. It doesn't lead to long-lasting peace. And that was tried with Milosevic, as you all know, in early 90s, when some were calling him the peacemaker, or the guy without whom peace is impossible. But unfortunately, that led to, as we know, hundreds of thousands of civilians killed. Now, that was about what I think about Vučić. Obviously, there's no trust because he has killed the principle of good faith in negotiations. But who I trust is our allies and partners. I fully trust that our allies and partners, primarily the United States as well as the European Union, have the best in mind, the best intentions when it comes to long-term peace and stability, and that with their increased engagement, we might find a way to all contribute in one way or another for more peace and stability. Now, obviously, again, I believe Kosovo, just like in the past, will contribute much more than Serbia, but I do hope that our allies and partners will find a way to bring Serbia closer to the values that are the very foundation of the European Union, and will find the best approach to make that happen. So we trust them, as we did in the 90s, as we did when we declared independence, and as we do now. Our trust and our full reliance is there, while at the same time, of course, we protect the very best interests of our country, because we believe that by pushing for solutions that are multi-ethnic, that are against segregation, that are in favor of people integrating and living together, we're doing a favor not just to our country, but to the peace and stability in the entire region by pushing forward for ideas that are kind of 21st century models rather than 19th century models. We are, of course, first and foremost supporting our country's interest, but also giving a contribution for the entire region. And my last point on that, what is important for our region to work on, no matter how difficult it is and no matter the challenges on the way, is the Euro-Atlantic path. Montenegro is already in NATO. We're aiming to join NATO. I believe if someone truly wants to invest in peace and stability in the Western Balkans, the way has never been clearer. Help Kosovo get into NATO, help the Western Balkans join the European Union, help us all join the family of the values-based systems. When these countries are in the EU, and in our case also in NATO, then that's when the entire paradigm will change. As you have rightly pointed out, with the way how things are going right now, it might take, let's say, North Macedonia more than 100 years in this tempo to get to the European Union.
It's a quite long time.
Yes, so it's been almost 2 decades, and to be very frank, sometimes that causes a lot of frustration. But among the people of Kosovo, while the frustration is there for the longevity of how much the process of visa levies has taken and still taking, how the complexities of the EU process are making people really impatient. But there has never been a doubt in anyone's mind that this is our only path. The only path is the European path. We have never flirted with any other solution, neither will we. So that is extremely important, and that's, I think, the biggest contribution that the Western world or the European Union can make to peace and stability in the region is to open its arms to the democratic countries of the Western Balkans as soon as possible, because it's been too many delays on the way. That's the biggest contribution that they can give. Now, getting to your question on the proposal that's on the table, as you know, Kosovo has seen the proposal as a very good basis for discussion, which is a platform, a good platform to move ahead. So now we're awaiting for Brussels talks to reconvene again. And in those talks, we're hoping, and we've been guaranteed by our partners, that the negotiations will focus on what we call the implementation plan. It's a sequencing of events that is required of the parties. So we need to negotiate that so that it can become really implementable in practice, and one that really avoids creating more problems for the future rather than solutions. And secondly, what we're going to discuss, and that's mostly between us and our partners rather than Kosovo and Serbia, to discuss the international guarantees that Kosovo will receive in order to make sure that Serbia is not left with any instrument in hand through which it will continue to undermine Kosovo's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity.
Do you trust your international partners on that?
Kosovo has achieved success in its history only when it had its international partners by its side. So we ought to learn from history, and it is extremely important that for the way ahead, we fully coordinate with our international partners. Now, these talks about guarantees are not over yet, so we're in the process of discussing with both our European and American partners what kind of international guarantees we will receive, especially when it comes to Kosovo's international standing. And that takes me to the last bit of your question, which regards the association of Serb-majority municipalities. Now, let me say at the outset, Kosovo is not against Serb minority rights. We're not against Serbs having the highest guarantees that exist out there based on the best European and international human rights standards. In fact, even as we speak, there's no single country, let's say in the Council of Europe, that provides their minority community the kind of guarantees that we do. For example, I'm not sure if, let's say in this room, there's anyone who does not allow any system where the constitution cannot be changed unless 10 MPs out of 120 vote in favor. So even if 110 vote in favor, if the remaining 10 do not, we cannot change the constitution. So even with over 90% of the votes, we cannot change the constitution because the Serb community has a veto right over that. Or, I don't think there's anyone in this room or beyond where in their system they cannot change their electoral legislation or their education reforms legislation or legislation related to human rights or to religious rights without the vote of those 10 MPs out of 120. They have the veto right. We've been passing legislation on religious rights and on the higher education system for the past 4 mandates from one legislature to another, although everyone else is in favor, because only these 10 seats that are occupied by Serb community do not want to vote in favor. So, and that these guarantees are not only at the national level, but they are mirrored at the local level as well. And they don't exist in any other European country to this extent that they are used as a veto. And of course, not to mention a lot more when it comes to the rights of the church and the law on special zones, protected zones, and so much more that we did as part of Ahtisaari negotiations, and then more during these 12 years of negotiations, 13 actually, soon. So we are not against rights of minority communities, but we need to make sure that the system that is in place as a result of these talks is one that does not undermine the internal functionality of Kosovo, that is in line with Kosovo's constitution, does not resemble Republika Srpska, because as we know, it's a failed model that we shouldn't look at, and does not have executive powers, which would create a third layer of government, which is not allowed by our constitution. If I put all of this in one place, and we're asked, why are you insisting on these preconditions? The answer is very simple. Because Serbia should not be left with an instrument in its hand through which they, on one hand, keep hostage the minority community Serbs who live in Kosovo, and secondly, they are able to continue to undermine Kosovo's sovereignty and independence. Just imagine, I'll finish with this, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, even though they recognize Bosnia and Herzegovina, they use Republika Srpska as an instrument to undermine Bosnia and Herzegovina. Can you imagine what would happen in a situation where Serbia doesn't recognize Kosovo and they are given a similar instrument, how much damage they would do, not just to us, but to peace and stability in the region. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you very much. President Osmani, I had one interesting discussion with some international partners in a couple of addresses here and overseas, and I told them that time that it's very hard to believe that Euro-Atlantic community can create new friends in Western Balkans, especially that can create new friends in a very fast pace. So do you believe that new friends can be created in the Western Balkans for Euro-Atlantic community? I'm telling that in the light of something which became very visible, especially lately, in terms of how parts of international community are addressing subjects in Belgrade and how they are addressing subjects in Pristina. So for us it's quite interesting, sometimes even huge difference in resolution, in musical terms between those kinds of those two addressings. It's a different tonality, it's a different set of messages, it's a different intensity, and sometimes you can read some very confusing messages. Are you confused with that as well? And do you really think that new friends can be created overnight in Western Balkans, and that we all be happy family here under the very quick solutions that serve individual or collective interests, without very clear solution that will be long-lasting and not to be detriment of any parts?
I certainly don't think it's possible overnight to create new friends or a new friend, if I may call it so, because we're talking about one particular country. For many reasons. One, because I strongly believe that the policy of appeasement is not going to convince Serbia to become that friend. It will have the opposite effect. If the international community had chosen a different path of convincing Serbia, which I believe should have happened, let's say, when Serbia remained the only country to not join sanctions against Russia and in fact multiplied its political, military, and economic cooperation with Russia, it was about time for the European Union to stop further negotiations with Serbia for membership, to freeze the negotiations with Serbia. Secondly, as history shows, they need to hear clear messages and clear signs and clear action from the international community rather than appeasement. So that would have helped, but still it wouldn't make it happen overnight. But with an active appeasement policy, I don't see that happening, gaining a new friend in the Western Balkans, although, to be frank, that would have been in the interest of all of us, because a democratic, pro-European Serbia is in the interest of the people of Serbia, but it's also in the interest of everyone else in the region to have a neighbor that respects you, to have a neighbor that doesn't send paramilitary forces to destabilize you, to have a neighbor that recognizes you. So the bottom line of this is Serbia's denial that Kosovo exists as an independent and sovereign country, the same way that Russia's denying the existence of Ukraine as an independent and sovereign nation and country. So the bottom line is practically that. How else this would have contributed to, I agree with you and with President Đukanović that if clear solutions would have been pursued instead of what sometimes is used in proposals, which is that sort of constructive ambiguity, which then can be interpreted by both parties as they wish, it would have been so much better for the long-term perspective of the Western Balkans and for long-term peace and stability. So all in all, we don't question the motives of the international community when it comes to the Western Balkans. Quite the opposite. I think everyone is interested to have long-lasting peace and stability. But what I disagree on is this active appeasement policy that is being used towards a guy who never walks the talk. Never walks the talk. What he says and what he does are two different things. And he's showing that over and over and over again, giving a lot of evidence that he's not going to walk the talk again, but yet he's being called constructive and a great leader for never walking the talk, for never implementing what he has agreed to, for sending paramilitary forces inside Kosovo, for giving them military-scale weapons, for building barricade, Croatia-style, 1993, for building trenches, military-style trenches within the territory of Kosovo, for sending Russian MiG-29s around the border of Kosovo, for building 48 forward operation bases around the border of Kosovo, 48 forward operation bases, for keeping a Russian so-called humanitarian center around the border with Kosovo, very close by, which according to the American Department of Defense is a Russian spy center, for being the only country in Europe that has not adopted sanctions against Russia, for turning into a safe haven for Russian oligarchs, for organizing about 100 military exercises with Russia per year. Is that what makes you a constructive partner? Versus Kosovo, the non-constructive partner, which is that a 100% alignment with the European Union, 100% on every single foreign and security decision, although we don't have an obligation to do that because we don't have a candidate status yet. Apart from Serbia, which has already opened and closed some chapters. Kosovo, who has completely stood with the international community on Ukraine. Kosovo that is an embodiment of protection of human rights, a thriving civil society, the best in the region on freedom of media, topped another 20 place higher in Transparent International report in only 2 years when it comes to fighting crime and corruption. And I don't shy away to say, we are miles ahead of Serbia in terms of democracy, which should be what brings us together as a value. And if I start just mentioning here the list of concessions and compromises that Kosovo has made throughout the dialogue, it would take us time until tomorrow morning. But many of you are aware of that. Kosovo has made and is making compromises. But the question here is not just what's happening to Kosovo. It's a much bigger picture than that. Is the international community going to allow one of its greatest foreign policy success stories to fail or not? Because Kosovo is one of the greatest foreign policy success stories of the democratic world. It's an embodiment of what democracies can achieve when they stand together against tyranny, against genocidal regimes, and in favor of human rights and democracy, and most importantly, the value of freedom. The value of freedom. And sometimes, I'm just going to conclude with this, sometimes we are faced with people who believe that the world has started in 2011 with the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. Well, it didn't. There is a context that led us where we are today. And the context is, as President Đukanović mentioned, we were victims of an ongoing genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And because of that and other legal and historical contexts, because Kosovo was a constituent part of former Yugoslavia and became independent based on the same model that other countries that are today independent, and because of the confirmation that we received from the International Court of Justice about this right to become independent, we believe that it's so important that we do not allow what I call the Russian-Serb interest, unfortunately, to be given any instrument in hand to destroy the successes that we have jointly achieved. Because whatever we have achieved in Kosovo, we've achieved it together with our friends. It's a result of the resilience of the people of Kosovo, our struggle for freedom, but also the support of our allies. So protecting what we have achieved in Kosovo is not just helping one country, a small country out there. It's protecting one of the biggest success stories of Western democracies in the past centuries, I would say, not just the past decades.
Well, I will go back before I pass the floor to President Đukanović very shortly, because I asked similar question also member of the President of Bosnia, Mr. Komšić, when he was our guest last time here, and you mentioned that as well regarding the corruption, because now predominant mantra of significant part of international community regarding the Western Balkans is corruption is the root of everything. And no, nationalism, religious extremism, or similar things, or chauvinism. No, that's the second issue. Everything is provoked by corruption. So I just ask also, did the war start in 1991? Did it start because of corruption? The war in Kosovo, 1999, did it start because of corruption? Those things that are happening now between Serbia and Kosovo, are they happening because of corruption, or maybe because something which is deeper and much longer lasting than the issues which are very important of the corruption? But I think that they have roots, I think that they came as a consequence, not as a root. So do you agree with this? Or what's your opinion about that?
Certainly, the war in Kosovo did not start because of corruption, but it started because of the hegemony, the hegemonic and genocidal mentality that existed under the leadership of Serbia at that time. If we're talking about today, I would say it's a combination of both, but I would agree with you, it's not the root. So why is Serbia taking the position that it's taking right now? It's again because of those hegemonic ideas that prevail in the current leadership. But is the fact that they are deeply corrupted helping them? Absolutely. Absolutely. The fact that they are deeply corrupted is making things worse. But that, I think, additionally means that if, let's say, fighting corruption domestically and abroad is a priority of our allies, and I absolutely agree with that priority, then a country like Kosovo that is championing the fight against crime and corruption should be supported and not sometimes use, based on the examples that you've taken on how the leadership of Kosovo is called and how the leadership of Serbia is called in different statements from time to time, not to use, that idea that it's easier to twist my friend's arm. Yes, we are the most pro-European, the most pro-American country in the world, but focusing the pressure on Kosovo is not only going to weaken what is the biggest foreign policy success story of the democratic world, but at the same time is going to pave the way for more destability, for more destabilizing tactics by Serbia. We've learned that the hard way. So this is not just a prediction, it's something that we've seen happening all and all over again.
Thank you. Hvala. Onda bih, izvinjavam se prije nego što zaključimo, onda bih definitivno pružio priliku uvaženim sagovornicima da po 5 minuta pošalju određene poruke koje su možda propustili da pošalju kroz ova pitanja koje sam ja postavio, a koje biste željeli možda da kažete.
I will certainly use less than 5 minutes, just to once again reiterate how proud I am of the great relationship that has been built between the Republic of Kosovo and Montenegro, a relationship that can serve as a model for good neighborly relations in our region and beyond. And I really do hope that throughout this cooperation we will find ways to take it to new heights in many, many areas, and look forward to working with Montenegro in that regard. As a region, I am hopeful that the European Union will also see us as a potential, not just as a burden that sometimes some might see us, and also understand that it's in the geostrategic interest of the Union itself to bring the Western Balkans closer and ultimately within the Union, because the more Western Balkans within the European Union, the more peace will be. And as you know, it is our joint intention to have our continent as a Europe hold free and at peace. And our people, the people of Kosovo, have been working for these values for centuries, even before the European Union was created. As a nation, we have been contributing to what today we call Western values. Well before the European Union was created. We are very proud of that, and that it's not just the foundation of the EU, it's at the very foundations of our state, of our independent state. We will continue in this path because we believe in the Euro-Atlantic path, and in this important way, we are very blessed to have friends and partners and allies like Montenegro by our side, and we will, of course, continue to work hand in hand to achieve this joint aim. I wish the people of Montenegro the very, very best, and look forward to working even closer than so far to making sure that we open new chapters of cooperation at the benefit of both of our countries.
Thank you, President Osmani, for these words.